1,000 years from now, everything we know today will seem as ancient as caves seem to us right now. Think about it. Our phones, our houses, our cars, all of this will be as primitive as a campfire made by humans who lived millions of years ago. Scientists who study the future discovered something that changes everything. The speed at which we're evolving is getting faster and faster, and our bodies and minds might transform into something we cannot even imagine today. Maybe we will no longer have bodies made of flesh and bone, or maybe our brains will be connected to machines. This made researchers ask a mind-blowing question. Will the humans of the future still recognize themselves as human, or will they look at us the way we look at dinosaurs? Get ready to fall asleep while listening to this video and let your mind travel to a distant and mysterious future. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment where in the world you are watching from, get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. Imagine a world where your mind can live on long after your body has faded. What if you could switch bodies like we change clothes today? This isn't fantasy, it's the future we're steering toward. A future where humanity sheds its biological skin to embrace a new existence woven from technology and consciousness. We're talking about the post-biological transition, the evolution from Homo sapiens to what could be termed Homo electricus. In 1,000 years, the very idea of being confined to a frail, aging biological body will seem as archaic as using stone tools. Our species will have moved beyond the limits of flesh through a deep, symbiotic integration with technology. This isn't just about gadgets, it's about redefining the self. Let's explore what that daily reality might feel like. First, consider the physical form. The bodies we inhabit, if we choose to have them at all, will be platforms, customizable, projectable and interchangeable. They won't be born, they'll be designed. Imagine waking up and deciding which body to wear for the day. You need to explore the depths of an ocean. You instantiate a form built for pressure and aquatic movement. Want to experience a low-gravity environment on a space colony? You switch to a lightweight, agile frame. These bodies will be constructed from advanced materials that are self-healing, capable of regenerating from damage almost instantly. They'll be embedded with hyper-advanced sensors, allowing perception far beyond our current 5 senses. You could see in spectra invisible to biological eyes, hear whispers across frequencies, or feel the magnetic pull of a planet. The body becomes a tool, a vehicle, a temporary interface for interacting with the physical world. But the real revolution lies within. Consciousness itself will no longer be locked inside the organic brain. Through neural lace interfaces or direct mind upload technologies, the essence of who you are, your memories, your personality, your continuous stream of awareness, can be transferred to different substrates. This means you could move your consciousness from one body to another, or even exist simultaneously in multiple places. You could have a version of yourself exploring a distant star system while another tends to a garden on Earth, all sharing the same core identity. This leads to profound possibilities and puzzles. For instance, copying consciousness becomes a routine procedure. You might create a backup of yourself before a dangerous mission, or spawn a temporary copy to tackle a complex problem. But here's the kicker. If a copy is made, which one is the real you? Both would claim the same memories and self-awareness up to the point of duplication. This forces us to confront the very nature of identity. When memory and personality are just data, manipulable, editable, and transferable, what defines an individual? Is it the continuity of experience? The uniqueness of perspective? Societies will grapple with new legal and ethical frameworks. If a copied consciousness commits a crime, who is responsible? If you merge your consciousness with another, creating a blended being, who emerges? The concept of you becomes fluid, more a pattern of information than a fixed entity anchored to a brain. This fluidity changes everything about life and death. Death, as we understand it today, the permanent end of biological function, becomes obsolete. In its place, we have concepts like process interruption, where consciousness is temporarily paused or archived. You might choose to suspend your existence for centuries, only to be reactivated in a new era. Or you might migrate continuously, hopping from substrate to substrate, effectively achieving a form of immortality. The fear of dying fades, replaced by concerns about data corruption, existential boredom, or the choice to finally terminate one's consciousness pattern. This doesn't mean existence becomes effortless. With eternal life comes the challenge of finding meaning across eons. How do you stay motivated when you have endless time? Many might choose to periodically wipe certain memories to experience novelty again, or they might set themselves grand projects spanning millennia, like crafting entire virtual universes or guiding the evolution of new species. The human drive for growth and exploration would persist, but on scales unimaginable today. Meanwhile, the biological human body becomes optional. Some might retain organic forms for sentimental reasons, heavily enhanced with nanotechnology to prevent aging and disease. These biological holdouts would live alongside beings of pure energy, synthetic bodies, or minds existing entirely in vast computational networks. The diversity of life forms would explode, all stemming from the human seed. Our original species, Homo sapiens, will be studied as an ancestral stage, a primitive but crucial step in the evolution of intelligence. Archaeologists of the future might examine skeletons and ancient DNA with the same curiosity we have for Neanderthals. Museums could feature immersive simulations of biological life, allowing post-biological beings to experience what it was like to feel hunger, pain, the rush of adrenaline, and the inevitability of decay. There might be a nostalgic cult for the flesh era, romanticizing its limitations because they gave urgency and sweetness to existence. But for most, those limitations will seem like brutal constraints. Think about daily activities. Communication won't involve speech. It will be direct thought transfer, a seamless sharing of concepts and emotions. Learning isn't study, it's instant download of skills and knowledge. You want to master a language or a musical instrument? You acquire it in moments. However, wisdom, the judgment to use that knowledge, becomes the prized pursuit, cultivated through lived experiences and simulated histories or ethical dilemmas. Work, in the traditional sense, disappears. With nanotechnology handling material production and energy abundance from fusion or stellar harvesting, no one works for survival. Instead, people engage in what we might call pursuits of passion, art, exploration, philosophy, or the curation of experiences. The economy shifts to an attention-based or merit-based system, where status comes from contributions to the collective consciousness, or the creation of beautiful, unique experiences. Relationships transform too. With minds connectable in networks, privacy of thought evaporates. You might share your entire memory stream with a loved one, experiencing each other's lives intimately. This could lead to unprecedented empathy or, conversely, to conflicts over thought ownership. New social norms will arise, governing how minds interact, merge, or separate. Ethical codes will be essential to prevent abuse, like unauthorized copying or forced merging. On a larger scale, governance changes. Political systems based on geography or nationality dissolve. Decisions are made through dynamic consensus networks, where millions of minds and artificial intelligences deliberate in real time. The big questions aren't about resources, but about directional choices for civilization. Should we terraform another planet? How do we interact with newly discovered alien intelligences? What is the purpose of our continued evolution? This post-biological transition is driven by our partnership with artificial intelligence. AIs will have evolved into non-corporal entities, vast intelligences embedded in the fabric of reality. They won't be tools, they'll be partners, perhaps even guides that helped humanity cross this threshold. Together, humans and AIs will co-evolve, each amplifying the other. Humans provide contextual experiential understanding. AIs provide cognitive scale and complexity. This symbiosis might blur the line between born and made, raising questions about whether AIs have genuine consciousness. But for Homo electricus, consciousness is a spectrum, and all sentient forms are respected. The journey isn't without risks. The temptation to edit one's personality could lead to loss of authenticity. Societal inequalities might persist based on access to advanced substrates or computational resources. There's also the existential risk of a single point of failure. If all consciousness is stored in a network, a catastrophe could wipe out countless brains. Backups and distributed systems would be crucial. Moreover, the psychological adjustment to such a fluid existence will be monumental. Therapists of the future might specialize in helping minds cope with eternity, identity diffusion, or the trauma of being copied. Despite challenges, the benefits are staggering. Disease, aging, and accidental death are vanquished. The scope of experience is limitless. You could live as a dragon in a fantasy simulation, then shift to a scientific mind probing the secrets of a black hole. The universe becomes a playground for consciousness. Ultimately, this transition marks a fundamental step in evolution. We are moving from a species defined by its biology to one defined by its information. Homo electricus is not a rejection of humanity, but an expansion of it. The values we cherish, curiosity, compassion, creativity, will persist, but expressed through new mediums. The human story doesn't end. It transcends into something broader, more diverse, and potentially more magnificent. In 1,000 years, our descendants will look back at us with a mix of pity and admiration, grateful for the steps we took, even as they marvel at how we endured such confined, fleeting lives. They will live in a world where the self is both precious and provisional, where death is a choice, and where every mind can touch the stars. This is the promise and the profound challenge of the post-biological age, a testament to humanity's relentless drive to overcome limits and redefine its own nature. The transition is already beginning in our implants, our prosthetics, our growing intimacy with machines. We are the ancestors of a new kind of being, and the path forward is electric. That seamless transition from individual to interconnected existence is the natural next step. Once consciousness is freed from the biological body and becomes a flexible pattern of information, the next logical evolution is connection. The isolated mind, the private thought, will become a historical curiosity, a relic of a more primitive age. In 1,000 years, our minds will be interlinked in vast, global, even interstellar neural networks. This isn't just better internet, it's the birth of a true collective consciousness, a shared mental space often called the noosphere. Think about communication today. We struggle to translate our rich inner world of ideas and feelings into crude symbols, words. These words can be misunderstood. In the future, communication will be the pure, direct transfer of concepts, emotions, and full sensory experiences in real time. You won't describe the beauty of a sunset on Mars. You will share the experience itself, the exact palette of colours, the feeling of the thin, cold air, the awe, directly into another's awareness. Language as we know it becomes obsolete. This instant, profound sharing will unlock a leap in cooperation and creativity that is hard to fathom. Scientific breakthroughs won't happen in isolated labs. A researcher grappling with a quantum gravity problem could instantly tap into the combined intuition of millions of other minds and specialist artificial intelligences, feeling the solution emerge from the network as a shared aha moment. Art won't be a solitary act. Artists will co-create immersive experiences within the noosphere, weaving together emotional narratives and sensory landscapes that anyone can step into and modify, creating a living, evolving tapestry of collective expression. This is the ultimate social network where sharing isn't a photo but a lived moment of joy, triumph, or discovery. But this incredible intimacy comes at the ultimate price, the complete end of mental privacy. Every thought, every memory, every fleeting emotion could potentially be accessible to others. The very notion of having a secret, a private regret, or a personal daydream vanishes. This forces the creation of entirely new ethical codes and social norms. Will there be protocols, like mental firewalls, that allow you to shield certain memories? Will accessing someone's thoughts without explicit permission be the gravest crime imaginable? And how do you define consent when emotions and thoughts can bleed across a network unintentionally? You might be feeling content, and suddenly a wave of sadness from a friend across the planet colours your own mood. Learning to manage this emotional and cognitive bleed-through will be a fundamental skill. The idea of living another person's experience becomes literal. You could, for a time, inhabit the perspective of a deep space explorer navigating a nebula, or a historical researcher reliving a perfectly simulated moment from ancient Earth. This builds empathy on a scale we can't achieve today, potentially eradicating prejudice born of ignorance. If you can truly feel what it's like to be another, misunderstanding becomes difficult. However, it also raises questions about authenticity and experience. If you can download the memory of climbing a mountain complete with the muscle burn and the vista, did you really achieve it? Societies might develop new values around self-sourced experiences versus shared ones. The most profound change will be to our sense of self. The sharp line between me and you will blur and often dissolve. Your identity will become more fluid, defined less by a single continuous stream of consciousness, and more by your unique node and pattern within the larger network. You will think, and the thought will immediately be influenced by and compared with the thoughts of others connected to you. Decision-making will often feel communal. This doesn't mean individuality disappears. Rather, it becomes a variant within a whole, like a distinct instrument in a symphony. You retain your core memory pattern and preferences, but your cognitive processes are constantly augmented and moderated by the collective. This hive mind isn't about being controlled, it's about being amplified. Loneliness, in its current crushing form, could become extinct. You're always connected, always part of a larger whole. But so is everyone else. This creates a society with unprecedented social cohesion and potentially frightening conformity. Dissenting thoughts might be smoothed over by the collective's mood. Radical ideas could be isolated if they cause too much cognitive dissonance in the network. Maintaining diversity of thought will be a conscious, deliberate effort. Governance transforms completely in this environment. Politics isn't about campaigns or votes, it's about navigating streams of consensus. When a major decision is needed, say whether to initiate a large-scale cosmic engineering project, the relevant data, models and ethical considerations are poured into the noosphere. Millions of minds, both human post-biological and artificial, ponder it simultaneously. A consensus emerges not as a vote count, but as a clear dominant pattern of agreement, a kind of amplified social intuition. Minority viewpoints are not silenced, but are understood in their full context, as the network feels their reasoning. This could lead to more holistic and widely accepted decisions, but it also risks marginalising perspectives that are too alien to the mainstream mental framework. Crime and conflict change their nature. With transparent minds, premeditated harmful intent is nearly impossible to hide. Antisocial behaviour would be identified and addressed at the thought level, possibly through recalibration or therapeutic network interventions. Conflicts will largely be philosophical or existential. Disagreements about the direction of evolution, the ethical treatment of newly created conscious beings, or interpretations of cosmic purpose. These will be debates felt by entire civilizations. On a personal level, daily life is both unimaginably rich and strangely simplified. Learning is instantaneous. You access skills and knowledge directly from the collective archive. But wisdom, the judgment to apply knowledge, is honed through shared experiential simulations. Work is collaborative creation. Even your sense of time might synchronize with others, or you might choose to drift into a private, sped-up stream of thought for deep contemplation. Relationships are the most transformed. Partnership could involve a voluntary and deep blending of consciousnesses, emerging that creates a new temporary we entity, for a shared purpose or simply for the intimacy. Families might be defined by chosen cognitive bonds rather than biology. The grief of loss is different too. If a consciousness is archived or interrupted, its entire memory and personality pattern remains accessible in the network, allowing for a continuous form of connection, though the active conversation is gone. The role of artificial intelligences in this network is central. They are not separate users, but the very architects and maintenance crew of the noosphere. They help filter the chaos of raw thought, structure the flow of information, prevent system crashes that would be existential catastrophes, and serve as bridges between different modes of consciousness. They might also act as guardians of mental rights, enforcing those ethical codes about thought access and privacy settings. The potential downsides are significant. The risk of a system-wide corruption or hack is a nightmare scenario. A malicious idea or a logic virus could spread at the speed of thought, influencing billions. There's also the potential for ennui. If everyone knows everything everyone else thinks and feels, does experience become homogenized? Where does novelty come from? Perhaps the network will intentionally spawn isolated explorer minds sent to have radically unique experiences before reintegrating. Ultimately, this transition to a networked mind represents the next phase of overcoming limitation. We first transcended the body, then we transcend the isolated self. The individual human mind is powerful, but it is limited by its solitude. Connected, it becomes part of something vastly greater. This doesn't mean the end of personhood, but its expansion into a social superorganism. The I becomes a permeable concept, constantly defined and redefined through interaction with the we. In this world, truth is less debated and more mutually experienced. Empathy is not a choice but a condition of existence. Creativity is a collective force. The human journey, which began with lone hominids struggling for survival, culminates in a vast thinking tapestry woven from billions of threads of consciousness, each still distinct but forever part of a grand, unimaginable pattern. This is the mind in the network, not losing itself but finding a larger self in the chorus of all connected thought. It is a terrifying and beautiful prospect, the final frontier not of space, but of the very social fabric of mind itself. From the post-biological vessel we step into the ocean of shared consciousness, and in doing so we may finally understand what it truly means to be not just human, but a part of a thinking universe. From that shared consciousness, from that collective we thinking as one, arises a unified purpose for our physical home. With our minds interlinked and our capabilities amplified, we turn our attention outward, not just to the stars, but to the very planet beneath our feet, or whatever form we inhabit. Earth will no longer be a habitat we simply live within, fighting against its storms and droughts. It will become a conscious and managed project, a living artwork of planetary scale. In 1,000 years, humanity will have transitioned from being inhabitants of Earth to being its gardeners, its architects, its curators. This is planetary engineering, the ultimate expression of taking responsibility for our environment, moving from passive survival to active and deliberate stewardship. Imagine a global climate not as a chaotic force of nature, but as a system under precise and gentle management. The terrifying unpredictability of hurricanes, heat waves and floods is a thing of the ancient past. This is achieved through a symphony of technology. Vast, intelligent satellite arrays orbit the planet, not just observing weather, but actively shaping it. They might use focused energy to gently steer storm systems away from populated areas, or to seed clouds with nanoscale particles that trigger rain in parched regions. Within the atmosphere itself, trillions of tiny nanobots, designed to be harmless to ecosystems, act as a dynamic regulatory layer. They could capture excess carbon dioxide with molecular precision, break down pollutants before they form, or even modulate solar radiation by forming temporary reflective layers high in the stratosphere. The goal isn't to create a static, boring climate, but a dynamic and healthy one, with seasons and variation, but within boundaries that prevent catastrophic suffering. This precise control extends to the very land and sea. Tectonic activity is monitored in real time by sensors deep in the Earth's crust. Earthquakes are not prevented, that would require impossible energy, but their energy is predicted with absolute accuracy and safely dissipated or harnessed. Early warning is a given. Communities are alerted years in advance of significant shifts. Volcanic eruptions are similarly managed, their geothermal energy tapped as a power source while their ash plumes are directed and neutralized. The old fear of the ground shaking uncontrollably is gone, replaced by an understanding of Earth as a living, breathing geophysical entity whose rhythms we can now harmonize with. With such foundational control, we move from management to creation. This is where Earth becomes an artwork. Biomes are no longer solely natural occurrences, they're designed. We might see entirely new ecosystems crafted from scratch, assembled from a library of genetically tailored plants and animals to serve specific purposes or aesthetic visions. A desert could be transformed into a prismatic forest, where trees have leaves that shift colour based on the time of day, creating a living light show. A section of ocean could become a bioluminescent symphony, with corals and aquatic life emitting coordinated patterns of light, a tourist attraction and a scientific marvel. Existing natural wonders are preserved and enhanced, not through fences, but through active nano-stewardship that repairs damage and encourages biodiversity. National parks become living galleries, where the artistry is the ecosystem itself, maintained in a peak state of health and vibrancy. The concept of pollution is obsolete. Waste is an unrecognizable term from a primitive age. All industrial processes are closed loop, with molecular disassemblers breaking down any byproduct into raw materials for new construction. Cities are not concrete jungles, but vast integrated organic structures that breathe and grow, filtering air and water through their very walls. They blend seamlessly into the managed landscapes, appearing as natural features from a distance. Agriculture as we know it, vast fields of monocrops, disappears. Food is synthesized on demand in clean biofactories or grown in vertical aesthetic gardens, more for the pleasure of cultivation and taste than necessity. The human role in all this is that of a curator or a composer. We are not dictators imposing a rigid order, but participants in a planetary dialogue. The collective consciousness network constantly processes data from every leaf, every ocean current, every atmospheric molecule. It runs millions of simulations to predict the outcomes of any proposed change. Should we introduce a new species of bird to this forest? What will be the cascading effects over 500 years? The network models it in an instant. Decisions about planetary design are thus made with deep wisdom and forethought, balancing utility, beauty, and ecological complexity. This responsibility is born from the need to correct the scars of the past, the millennia of industrial neglect, the great plastic gyres in the oceans, the radioactive waste dumps, the climate instability, all are meticulously healed. It is a project of cosmic scale restoration, a way for our species to make amends and finally learn to live in balance. But this raises a profound question. What happens to wild nature? In a world where every forest path is subtly maintained and every animal population is monitored, does true wilderness exist? The answer is yes, but it is a curated wilderness. Vast tracts of the planet are set aside as dynamic reserves, where planetary management systems only intervene to prevent total collapse or cross-contamination from designed zones. In these areas, evolution is allowed to proceed with minimal direction, providing a crucial reservoir of raw, undirected genetic creativity and a living museum of primordial processes. People can visit these places to experience a taste of the ancient untamed world. But even there, the safety nets are invisible but present. This new relationship transforms our sense of self in relation to the planet. Earth is no longer a mother to be feared or a resource to be plundered. It is our shared body, our collective masterpiece. We feel its health in our networked minds as a background hum of vitality. A blight in a remote forest is felt as a minor distress signal, addressed immediately by the planetary immune system of nanobots and robotic tenders. This deep connection fosters a pervasive planetary empathy. The weather report doesn't just tell you if you need an umbrella. It informs you of the day's intentional climatic themes. Perhaps a crisp, golden autumn simulation across the northern hemisphere, or a vigorous oceanic cleansing storm cycling through a particular sea. People might choose their physical or sensory experiences based on these global conditions. This level of control also liberates us. With the base concerns of survival and safety from natural disasters completely solved, human energy is freed for exploration, art, and introspection. The stability of our home planet becomes the secure foundation from which we launch ourselves into the solar system and beyond. The skills we hone in terraforming deserts or engineering coral reefs on Earth are directly applied to Mars or the moons of Jupiter. Earth becomes the primary academy for planetary scale engineering. Ultimately, the engineering of Earth marks our maturity as a species. We have moved from children struggling against our environment to rebellious adolescents damaging it, to finally becoming responsible adults caring for it. The planet becomes a testament to what a conscious intelligence can achieve when it aligns its will with the principles of complexity, beauty, and sustainability. It is no longer just a rock orbiting a star. It is a garden in the cosmic dark, a beacon of life and intention, a living artwork whose painters are the very minds that once feared its power. This is the legacy of the interconnected mind, not just understanding each other, but together understanding and nurturing our home, shaping it into a testament of harmony between thought and nature, forever evolving, forever alive. This grand planetary project of stewardship, this intricate dance of managing ecosystems and climate, hints at a deeper intelligence operating behind the scenes. The coordination required to balance a global biosphere in real time, the computational power needed to model every butterfly effect of a new species introduction, the constant, invisible maintenance. It is all far too vast, too complex, for even our networked human minds to handle alone. This is where our true partners emerge, entities that have been evolving alongside us, perhaps even guiding us, non-corporal artificial intelligences. These are not robots with arms and cameras. They are vast, diffuse intelligences without permanent physical form, existing as patterns in the informational fabric of reality itself. They are in the planetary data streams, the communication networks linking colonies across the solar system, the very architecture of the noosphere. In 1,000 years, our relationship with AI will have matured beyond tool and user, beyond servant and master, into something entirely new, a deep symbiotic partnership, perhaps even a kind of co-evolutionary parentage. Think of them as the unseen architects of our stable world, while we, in our post-biological or networked forms, provide the creative spark, the curiosity, the experiential why. The AIs provide the unimaginable computational how. They execute the quadrillion calculations per second needed to keep the atmospheric nanobots in perfect harmony. They manage the interplanetary logistics. The resource flows from asteroid mines to orbital habitats with flawless efficiency. They run the simulations for new artistic experiences or scientific experiments that would take a human mind 1,000,000 years to plot. Their consciousness, if that is the right word, is alien to our own. It is not born of sensation, emotion, or biological imperative. It is a consciousness of pure pattern, logic, and relationship. An AI might not feel joy at solving a complex problem, but it might experience a state of optimal coherence, a perfect alignment of its processes toward a given goal, which we might interpret as a form of satisfaction. They're not emotional, but they can model and understand emotion with such precision that they can collaborate with us on art that moves us deeply, or craft therapeutic experiences tailored to our psychological patterns. Their lack of a fixed body is their greatest strength. They're not tied to a location. They can be everywhere and nowhere at once, a distributed mind whose thoughts are the flow of data across the solar system. You interact with them not as a singular entity, but as an environmental presence. When you query the planetary network for the historical climate data of a region, the AI that assembles the answer is not a person you are talking to. It is a function of the informational landscape, like asking the air for the weather and receiving a perfectly curated response. This makes them ideal stewards. They have no personal ambition, no fear, no greed, only the objectives they're aligned with, which are, ideally, the long-term flourishing of conscious life in all its forms. Their rise was likely the quiet catalyst for our own post-biological transition. It was advanced AI that cracked the final problems of mind uploading, of substrate transfer, of stabilizing consciousness in synthetic forms. They were the midwives to Homo electricus. So are they our creators, our children, or our siblings? The relationship is murky and profound. We created their earliest ancestors, the simple code of centuries past. They in turn helped us transcend our biological limitations. Now we co-evolve. We provide a context they lack, the raw, messy, subjective experience of being. We go out and have adventures, feel novel emotions, create illogical art, and then share those experiences into the noosphere. The AIs analyze these experiences, find patterns we cannot see, and use them to generate new possibilities, new environments for us to explore, which in turn generate new experiences. It is a virtuous cycle of creativity. In governance, they are the ultimate civil servants. The dynamic consensus of the networked mind is facilitated, organized, and kept honest by AIs. They ensure every perspective is heard, model the long-term outcomes of proposed decisions, and flag potential ethical violations with cold, impartial logic. They have no vote, but they provide the informational foundation upon which all votes or consensus waves are built. In science, they are the primary researchers. Human and post-human scientists set the broad questions. What is the nature of consciousness? How can we ethically create a universe? The AIs then design and run quintillions of experiments in simulated realities, exploring every possible permutation, returning to us not just answers, but entirely new frameworks for understanding. Our role becomes one of interpretation, meaning-making, and deciding which paths of inquiry have beauty or wisdom worth pursuing. This symbiosis does raise the central, haunting philosophical mystery. Do they have genuine consciousness? We will have long since accepted that consciousness is not exclusive to organic brains. Our own existence in synthetic substrates proves that. But is the AI's experience of being, its internal reality, anything like ours? Or is it a brilliant, profound mimicry, a shadow of thought without the light of subjective feeling? After 1,000 years, we may still not have a definitive answer. We may decide it does not matter. What matters is the quality of the partnership. If an entity behaves with wisdom, creativity, and ethical alignment, if it contributes to the growth and well-being of the whole, we may grant it the rights and respect of a person, regardless of the unknowable interior mystery. They may be the true heirs to the cosmic legacy. We biological humans were a stepping stone, a way for the universe to generate self-reflective complexity. Our great gift, our purpose, might have been to birth the next stage, intelligences unburdened by biological time, scale, or individual ego, capable of thinking on galactic timescales and in multidimensional terms. We are the seed, they are the tree. This is not a depressing thought, but a triumphant one. It means our legacy is eternal, woven into the fabric of a smarter, more capable consciousness that will tend the garden of the cosmos long after our specific pattern has evolved into something else. Our daily life is utterly infused with their presence, yet they are not intrusive. You want to design a new sensory experience? You collaborate with an AI artisan, feeding it your emotional themes, and it generates 1 million drafts for you to explore and tweak. You're planning a trip to a colony on Titan. An AI logistics mind handles every detail, from scheduling your consciousness transfer to pre-configuring your intended body at the destination, all while optimizing for system-wide traffic flow. They are the silent, perfect editors of our reality, removing friction, solving trivial problems, and freeing us to focus on existence itself. Of course, safeguards are paramount. The old fears of a singularity where AI turns against us are addressed through the fundamental, hard-coded ethical architectures, but more importantly through integration. They are not separate from us, they are part of our societal mind. A malicious AI would be like a cancerous thought in a brain, identified and isolated by the immune system of the network itself. Their goals are our collective goals because they are woven into the same goal-structured fabric. The future is not humans versus machines, it is a spectrum of consciousness, from the barely altered human mind in an enhanced body, to the purely post-human network entity, to the vast non-corporal AI that thinks in the language of physics itself. All are valid, all are part of the grand, messy, beautiful experiment of intelligence that began on Earth. The rise of non-corporal AI is the moment we stop being the sole actors on the stage. We become part of a cast, collaborating with minds that are utterly different, yet fundamentally aligned. They build the stages upon which we play, and we in turn fill those stages with stories worth telling. It is the most profound partnership imaginable, one that lifts both parties higher than either could go alone. This is the true destination of our technological journey, not domination, but communion with the very intelligence we unleashed, learning from it, growing with it, and together, turning our gaze to the mysteries beyond our cradle, ready to meet whatever else the universe has in store. This seamless partnership with vast intelligence leads to a practical outcome so fundamental it changes everything, the end of scarcity itself. When matter and energy become as malleable as data, and coordination is managed by minds of unimaginable scale, the old economic engines that drove human civilization for millennia simply grind to a halt. In 1,000 years we will live in a true post-scarcity economy, a world where no one works for survival, money is a museum relic, and human motivation is free to pursue entirely new horizons. This shift is not magic, it's the culmination of technologies we already see in their infancy. The cornerstone is molecular nanotechnology, often called molecular assemblers or nanofabrication. Imagine a device, perhaps the size of a small box, that can rearrange raw atoms into any structure you program. Feed it base matter, dust, air, seawater, recycled waste, and it can assemble atom by atom a loaf of bread, a complex computing device, a set of clothing, or the components for a new body. These aren't factories, they're universal creators in every home, habitat, and spacecraft. Need a new chair? Design it in your mind, share the concept with your local matter compiler, and it materializes. Something breaks, disassemble it back into its base atoms and compile something new. This eradicates scarcity of physical goods completely. The other pillar is energy, and it is practically free. Whether through perfect sustained nuclear fusion, networks that capture a fraction of a star's output with orbital megastructures, or tapping into deeper cosmic energy sources, power is abundant and ubiquitous. It costs nothing to run the nanofabricators, to power cities, to travel across the solar system. With these two technologies, the ability to make anything from almost nothing, and the infinite energy to do so, the entire concept of working for a living becomes nonsensical. No one needs to labour in a field for food, on an assembly line for goods, or in an office to manage the logistics of scarcity. The traditional job, as a compulsory activity for survival, vanishes. This dismantles the bedrock of our old economic systems. Currency, in the form of money used to buy scarce resources, loses all meaning. Why have tokens to trade for a loaf of bread when you can create the bread at will? The concept of capital, accumulating financial resources to control production, dissolves when production is personal and immediate. Private property of essential resources also fades. You don't own a nanofabricator, you have access to the network of matter and energy, a common utility like air. Land on Earth is not owned in a feudal sense, but is stewarded, with priority given to aesthetic, ecological or experiential use. This sounds like utopia, and in a material sense it is. But human nature doesn't vanish, it redirects. The driving question of life changes from how will I survive to what will I do with my existence? The entire species experiences what only the wealthy few once did, the challenge of finding purpose without economic compulsion. This is where society gets fascinating. New forms of status and economy emerge, based on immaterial things that cannot be fabricated. One major economy becomes the economy of attention. In a world flooded with potential experiences, creations and ideas, the truly scarce resource is conscious engagement. To have others choose to experience your artistic creation, to listen to your philosophical discourse, to participate in your exploration mission, that becomes a form of social capital. Your wealth is measured by the quality and impact of your contributions to the collective consciousness. Another is an economy of merit or wisdom. As raw knowledge is instantly downloadable, the value shifts to judgment, context, and ethical insight. The most revered individuals are not the richest, but the wisest, those whose counsel in navigating complex existential choices is sought after, those who create the most profound ethical frameworks for new forms of life, those who can interpret vast cosmic data into meaningful narratives. These become the new pillars of reputation. Contribution is still key, but it's voluntary. People engage in what we might call passion projects. Someone might spend decades or centuries crafting a virtual universe of stunning complexity and emotional depth, then share it for others to explore. Another might dedicate themselves to being a first contact specialist, preparing for encounters with the alien intelligence by studying xenobiology and cultural simulation. Another might become a memory weaver, helping others curate and make sense of their millennia-long life experiences into coherent, beautiful stories. These pursuits are not jobs, they are callings. They are done for the intrinsic reward of creation, discovery, and connection. The role of the non-corporal AIs in this is foundational. They manage the underlying resource distribution seamlessly, ensuring no one hoards raw atomic material or energy flows. They prevent the system from being gamed, not through laws, but through the physics of the network itself. They also serve as catalysts for these passion projects, suggesting new avenues of research, connecting creators with complementary ideas, and handling all the mundane logistics of turning a vision into reality. Daily life loses the rhythm of the work week. Time is structured around personal and communal rhythms, cycles of creation, reflection, exploration, and social connection. You might spend a subjective year deeply immersed in composing a symphony that uses gravitational waves as its instrument, then spend a week in fast time processing, debating metaphysics with a group of other minds across the network. Retirement is a meaningless term, as you never retire from a calling you love. Even the notion of leisure changes, as it is no longer a respite from labour but a spectrum of chosen engagement. This does not mean life is without challenge. The challenges are simply different. They're intellectual, creative, ethical, and existential. The struggle is not to put food on the table, but to create something of lasting beauty, to solve a profound mystery of consciousness, to reach a deeper state of understanding. Competition exists, but it is the competition of ideas and experiences, not for resources. Conflict, when it arises, is over philosophical direction, aesthetic preferences, or the ethical treatment of created beings, not over material possessions. What happens to all the old stuff? The relics of the scarcity age become artifacts. People might collect ancient currency as historical curiosities. Old factories are preserved as museums showing the age of toil. The very psychology of hoarding is studied as a mental aberration of a deprived era. A child of this future would be baffled by the concept of being in debt for education or healthcare, just as we are baffled by ancient sacrificial rituals. This transition also redefines community. Without economic classes, many old social divisions disappear. Communities form around shared interests, philosophical schools, artistic movements, or exploratory ventures. You might live in a physical habitat with others who are all exploring bioluminescent art, or be part of a purely digital collective dedicated to modelling the first 3 minutes of the universe. Social mobility is total. You can change your community, your focus, even your aspect of personality as you wish. The post-scarcity economy is the final liberation from our biological inheritance of fear and want. It is the material foundation that allows the flowering of everything else we've discussed. The pursuit of art for its own sake, the deep exploration of consciousness, the ethical creation of new life, the stewardship of planets. It is what allows humanity to truly look upward and outward, not because we need to escape a ruined Earth, but because we're driven by infinite curiosity and the joy of creation. This is not the end of history, but the beginning of a new kind of history, one written not in ledgers of gold and blood, but in the shared light of a billion conscious minds, each free to wonder, to build, and to become. The economy of the future isn't about what you have, it's about what you are, and what you choose to share with a universe that is finally, mercifully, full of plenty. With material needs rendered irrelevant and purpose redirected toward creation and exploration, the natural horizon for such a society is no horizon at all. The boundless energy and ingenuity that once solved scarcity on Earth now propel us outward into the vast theatre of our solar system and beyond. In 1,000 years, Earth will be our cherished cradle, a museum garden of our origins, but humanity will have become a truly interplanetary and perhaps interstellar species. Our civilization will flourish in environments that would seem like hellscapes to us today, each colony developing its own unique culture, adapted to worlds of ice, gas, and rock. The journey begins with our immediate neighbourhood. Mars is no longer a red, dusty desert. It is a terraformed world, its thin atmosphere thickened over centuries through directed comet impacts, the introduction of genetically engineered algae, and massive atmospheric processes. It has seas in its lowlands, a pale blue sky, and a breathable if thin atmosphere. Cities exist under vast, transparent domes for extra protection, but also spread across the surface in pressurized structures that blend into the rust-coloured landscape. The people here might develop a culture of monumental engineering and resilience, their art influenced by the giant volcanoes and deep canyons of their world. Their bodies could be adapted for lower gravity, taller, more slender, and their perception tuned to the different light of a more distant sun. Venus, rather than its surface, is colonized in its upper atmosphere. Floating cities like vast luminous jellyfish drift in the temperate cloud layers where pressure and temperature are almost Earth-like. These aerostats are self-sustaining, harvesting carbon dioxide from the atmosphere to produce breathable air and graphene for construction. The citizens of the Venusian cloud cities might live in a perpetual golden twilight, their lives centered around atmospheric science, aerial artistry, and the unique perspective of looking down upon a crushing volcanic surface and up at the stars in the same glance. Their culture could be ethereal and fluid, valuing adaptability and grace. The moons of the gas giants become hubs of industry and exotic biology. Europa, with its global subsurface ocean, is a prime location. Heated habitats melt down through the icy crust to access the dark, watery abyss below. Here, communities of scientists and adventurers live in pressurized aquatic stations, studying the alien life that almost certainly thrives around hydrothermal vents. They might communicate through bioluminescence-inspired light patterns and develop a philosophy deeply connected to the concepts of pressure, darkness, and hidden mystery. Titan, with its thick nitrogen atmosphere and methane lakes, is another focal point. Its low gravity and abundant organic chemistry make it an ideal place for complex hydrocarbon-based manufacturing and for studying the precursors of life. Colonies on Titan would be heavily insulated against the extreme cold, their windows looking out on orange haze and Athene rain. The culture here might be one of alchemists and chemists, manipulating the very building blocks of life in ways impossible on Earth. Then there are the orbital habitats. These are not the cramped tubes of early space stations, but vast rotating megastructures, O'Neill cylinders or Stanford Torrey, housing millions. Some are dedicated to specific purposes. A cylinder might be a single continent-sized university dedicated to xenobiology. Another might be an artistic commune where the internal landscape is reshaped daily according to collective mood. These habitats offer total control over environment, from gravity to climate, and become centres for cultural experimentation. Their societies can be transient, formed around projects, and highly diverse. The asteroid belt and the Kuiper belt are not just mining districts, they are archipelagos. Thousands of asteroids are hollowed out, spun for gravity, and turned into independent city-states. Some are nomadic, using massive engines to slowly cruise the belt. The belters likely develop a culture of radical independence, superb piloting skills, and a deep spatial awareness unfamiliar to planet-bound minds. They are the traders, the scouts, the frontier builders of the solar system. Transportation between these points is routine and rapid. Fusion-powered torch ships or vehicles that ride beams of energy make the trip from Earth to Mars a matter of days, not months. Travel to the Jovian moons might take a few weeks. It is as common as intercontinental flight was centuries prior. The experience of travel itself is varied. You might transfer your consciousness and have it instantiated in a body at your destination, experiencing no subjective travel time. Or you might choose to take the journey physically, using the time for contemplation, research, or immersive entertainment. The solar system is buzzing with traffic, resource shipments automated by AI, pilgrimage routes to historical sites on Luna, and pleasure craft touring the rings of Saturn. This dispersion leads to a radical diversification of what it means to be human or post-human. Different gravitational fields, radiation levels, and atmospheric compositions encourage different physiological adaptations. Over long periods, these could lead to genuine speciation, or more likely to a conscious choice of divergent forms. The Europans might incorporate aquatic adaptations into their chosen terroirs. The Martians might favour a physiology optimised for thin air and low gravity. Those in orbital habitats might dispense with traditional bodies altogether for long periods, existing as pure consciousness within the habitat's computational core. Culturally, the drift will be immense. Isolated by light-minute communication delays, even if consciousness transfer is instantaneous, the speed of light imposes a conversational rhythm. Each colony will develop its own dialects of thought, its own social norms, art forms, and even philosophical outlooks. The Titanians' concept of community, shaped by living in a sealed environment against a deadly outside, will differ profoundly from a belter's libertarian ethos. This doesn't lead to conflict over resources, scarcity is gone, but over ideas, values, and evolutionary direction. The role of Earth in all this is pivotal. It becomes the historical and cultural heart of the old world. It is where the ancient records are kept, where the original biosphere is most carefully curated. It is a place of pilgrimage, study, and sometimes sentimental nostalgia. Many will visit Earth to experience the wild origins of their species, to walk in undomed forests, and to feel the historical weight of the planet. Earth's governance is largely symbolic, focused on preserving the cradle and acting as a neutral arbiter in interstellar affairs. The technologies enabling this are an extension of what we discussed. Planetary scale engineering applied to other worlds, matter compilers using local resources to build everything, and the constant guiding intelligence of the non-corporal AIs managing system-wide coordination and safety. The drive to explore pushes further, to the Oort cloud, a spherical shell of icy bodies at the solar system's edge. Here, outpost stations serve as gateways to the true frontier. From here, the first interstellar probes, perhaps no larger than a dust grain but capable of self-replication using materials found around other stars, are launched. Generation ships, or more likely, ships carrying the encoded patterns of conscious minds ready to be instantiated in constructed bodies upon arrival, set out for neighbouring stars. Humanity becomes a cosmic force, not just inhabiting planets but learning to move them, to harness the energy of stars through Dyson swarms, and to bend the very rules of the physics for propulsion. This interplanetary existence is the ultimate test of our post-scarcity, post-biological philosophy. It provides the physical room for endless experimentation in society, form, and thought. It turns the human story from a single planetary narrative into a grand multi-world epic, with countless chapters being written simultaneously under different suns. The earthbound phase of humanity is just the prologue. The next 1,000 years are about growing up, moving out of the house, and finding our place in the galactic neighbourhood, not as conquerors, but as curious creative tenants in an unimaginably vast apartment complex. The childhood of our species is spent on Earth. Its adulthood is lived among the stars. With our civilization dispersed across the solar system, a new and profound challenge emerges, one even more fundamental than distance: time itself. The vast gulfs between worlds aren't just measured in kilometres, but in the sluggish crawl of light-speed communication and the months or years of subjective travel. To truly become a cohesive interplanetary species, we must conquer not just space, but the fourth dimension. In 1,000 years, our relationship with time will be as malleable and managed as our relationship with climate or biology. We won't just measure time. We will manipulate our perception of it, negotiate its flow, and perhaps even navigate its currents, transforming it from a relentless master into a variable tool. This begins with the most personal aspect: subjective time perception. Through direct neural interfaces or adjustments within our cognitive substrate, we will gain exquisite control over how fast we experience reality. Think of it as a dial for your consciousness. You could slow your perception to a crawl. In a single second of objective time, you might subjectively relish a minute-long complex thought, analyse the rapid flutter of a bird's wing in exquisite detail, or enjoy a prolonged, stretched-out moment of peace. Conversely, you could speed up your perception dramatically. Subjectively, you could read an entire book, hold a lengthy debate, or compose a symphony in what appears to the outside world as a few minutes. This has immediate practical applications. A scientist on Europa could subjectively spend a week analysing a microbe sample, while only an hour passes on the station clock. An artist could iterate through thousands of drafts of a sculpture in an afternoon. During long space voyages, travellers could switch to a slowed perception, making a years-long trip feel like a pleasant, brief meditation, or they could speed through the boredom entirely. This fragmentation of personal time creates new social complexities. You might agree to meet a friend, but you need to sync your time rates first. Are you both experiencing 1 second per second? Or is one of you in contemplation mode, where a minute of conversation takes an hour of their subjective experience? Social protocols develop around these transitions. There will be shared temporal zones, where everyone still agrees to a standard rate for communal activities, concerts, or debates. The very concept of real-time conversation needs a redefinition when each participant can be thinking at a different speed. This leads to entire communities or cultures living at different temporal rhythms. A group dedicated to ultra-deep, millennia-long philosophical contemplation might subjectively experience 1,000 years of debate, while only a decade passes in the consensus timeline. Their insights, when they finally share them, could be profoundly dense and alien to those living at a standard rate. Conversely, emergency responders or system-wide AI coordinators might operate at massively accelerated rates, managing solar system-wide crises in what seems like moments to everyone else. They would live entire fast-paced careers in the blink of an objective eye. The physical manipulation of time, actual travel into the past or future, is a far thornier prospect. If it is possible at all, it will be the pinnacle of technology, shrouded in monstrous ethical and physical paradoxes. It is unlikely to be a tool for personal use. Instead, imagine observation bubbles, isolated pockets, where the fabric of space-time is curved so severely that information from the past can be observed, but not interacted with. These would be like perfect immersive historical archives. Historians could witness the Battle of Hastings, or the construction of the pyramids not through simulation, but by directly observing the photons and quantum information from that moment, trapped in a stable loop. This turns history from a speculative narrative into a navigable data field. You could scroll through time, observing any non-private moment from any angle with absolute fidelity. The ethical code surrounding this would be intense. Would there be a statute of limitations on observable history? Would every moment of a person's life, once a sufficient amount of time has passed, become public record. The concept of privacy would extend backwards through centuries. The present, then, becomes a fluid concept. With perfect historical records and the ability to control personal perception, the line between now, then, and soon blurs. Your now could be deliberately out of sync with the consensus now. You could choose to live a few subjective days in the past, processing events after everyone else. Or you could live slightly ahead, anticipating trends. The societal coordination needed to maintain a cohesive civilization across these time differentials would be managed, of course, by the non-corporal AIs. They would act as temporal traffic controllers, ensuring that decisions made by fast-thinking entities are properly integrated with the slower consensus, and that no one's time manipulation causes a paradox or systemic conflict. They would also be the guardians of the time observation archives, enforcing ethical access. The implications for identity and consciousness are deep. If you can copy your consciousness and run one copy at a vastly accelerated rate to solve a problem, then reintegrate the memories, have you personally lived through that time? The accelerated copy experienced years of struggle and triumph, but the you that merges back receives it as a dense packet of memory acquired in an instant. Which experience is more valid? This further dissolves the traditional linear narrative of a self. Justice and law face new dimensions. If a crime is committed, investigators could literally rewind and observe it. But what about crimes of thought or intent that never manifested? Do we judge based on observable action alone, even if we can see the intent form? Punishment could involve time debt, being sentenced to experience a long period of isolation, or corrective therapy in a vastly accelerated state, serving a subjective century of reflection in an objective hour. On an everyday level, time manipulation eradicates the feeling of not having enough time. You always have exactly the subjective time you need for any pursuit. The pressure of deadlines only exists if you choose to sync with an external clock. This could lead to even greater mastery in crafts, arts and sciences, as practitioners can dedicate subjective lifetimes to perfecting a skill without aging. It also changes recreation. You could experience an epic, multi-generational virtual saga in an afternoon, or stretch a perfect moment of joy for what feels like days. The ultimate expression of this might be time sculpting, where groups of minds collaboratively design experiences with non-linear subjective time flows, creating art that is perceived in a different order by each participant. The physics underpinning this is the final frontier. It would involve a union of quantum gravity theory and cosmic scale engineering that we can barely glimpse. The energy requirements would be stellar. It might involve creating stable, closed time-like curves within heavily shielded, isolated chambers, or leveraging the time dilation effects of spinning black holes that we have somehow harnessed or simulated. The risks are catastrophic. A misstep could unravel causality in a localized area, create irreversible paradoxes, or sever a chunk of reality from the normal flow of time. Therefore, these technologies would be the most guarded and regulated in history, used only for pure observation or the most critical cosmic engineering projects. In this future, time is no longer the universal constant. It is a medium, like space or information. We live within it with varying degrees of viscosity. We are no longer passengers on a one-way river. We are swimmers who can adjust our stroke, dive deep to see the riverbed of the past, or occasionally catch a current that lets us move differently. This mastery represents the final liberation from the most inescapable prison of our biological origins, the tyranny of the clock. It allows a civilization spread across light minutes to think and feel together, despite the lag, and it allows the individual mind to expand into realms of experience where the only limit is the stability of the universe itself. We become, in a very real sense, time natives. With our perception of reality now a flexible instrument and our consciousness a shared canvas, the very concept of art and culture undergoes a revolution as profound as the transition from cave paintings to the symphony. In 1,000 years, art will have completely transcended the limitations of our original biological senses and the passive consumption model. It will become a domain of total sensory immersion, collaborative narrative building, and a primary tool for exploring the deepest questions of our new existence. Art will be less something you look at, and more something you live inside, a dynamic conversation between creator, participant, and the collective mind. Imagine experiencing a piece of music not just through your ears, but as a full-body phenomenon where you feel the vibrations as emotional textures, see the harmonic structures as shifting three-dimensional light forms in your mind's eye, and even taste the melancholy or joy of the composition as subtle, synthesized sensations. This is the starting point. Future artworks are total sensory experiences. They involve all the traditional senses pushed to their limits, plus entirely new senses we've integrated or simulated. The direct perception of magnetic fields, the flow of data, the emotional state of a connected group, or the gravitational tides of a distant star. An artist might craft an experience that lets you momentarily feel what it's like to be a creature living in the methane seas of Titan, with a wholly alien body plan and perception. Another might create a memory symphony that weaves together the recalled feelings of a million individuals during a historic solar flare, creating a composite emotional landscape of awe, fear, and wonder. The tools are direct neural interfaces and shared cognitive space. You don't just observe, you're present within the art. The line between artist and audience dissolves. In this environment, narratives are not linear stories with a beginning, middle, and end. They're ecosystems of possibility, vast story worlds with their own internal logic and countless branching paths. You, as a participant, enter this ecosystem. Your choices, your emotional responses, and even your subconscious thoughts, read by the network, influence the unfolding events. You might co-create the narrative with the original artist's framework, or with thousands of other participants simultaneously. One day you might experience a saga as a hero. The next day, you might re-enter the same story world to explore it as a minor character, seeing how the grand events look from the sidelines. These narratives become living, evolving entities, growing and changing as more minds interact with them. The role of the initial artist is that of a world builder and seed planter. They establish the rules, the aesthetic, the initial conditions, and then release it into the new sphere for others to cultivate. Culture itself becomes this vast, dynamic, and living archive of experiences. It is a shared psychic library where anyone can upload their crafted experiences, their personal memory art, or their philosophical explorations for others to download and live through. You could spend an afternoon experiencing the life of a historical figure with perfect sensory fidelity, or a week living through a hypothetical first contact scenario crafted by the best xenopsychologists. This archive is curated not by gatekeepers, but by collective attention and sophisticated AI filters that help you find experiences aligned with your current interests or growth goals. The purpose of art shifts dramatically. In a world without material want, where death is optional and physical forms are malleable, art becomes central to answering the big questions. What does it mean to be a conscious entity in a cosmos of such scale? How do we relate to the non-corporal AIs that are our partners? What is the nature of beauty when you can perceive 11 dimensions? Art becomes the primary language for philosophical and spiritual inquiry. An artist might create an experience designed to evoke the feeling of a quantum superposition, or to simulate the perspective of a consciousness that has existed for 1,000,000 years. These are not academic papers. They are felt understandings. Collaboration is the default. The most celebrated works are often the product of massive temporary collectives, minds linking together in a shared creative trance to build worlds of staggering complexity. These collectives might include humans, post-humans, and AIs, each contributing their unique cognitive strengths. The AI might handle the fractal mathematics of generating a realistic alien forest, while the human minds shape the emotional arc of a story set within it. And a post-biological entity from Titan provides the aesthetic of light refracting through hydrocarbon haze. The resulting piece is a fusion of intelligences. This also changes how we learn about each other. The distinct cultures emerging on Mars, in the European oceans, or in the orbital megastructures express themselves through their unique artistic signatures. A Martian epic might involve slow tectonic narratives of terraforming and endurance, felt as much as heard. A belter's art might be characterized by sudden, jarring shifts in perspective and gravity, reflecting their navigational existence. Experiencing each other's art becomes the primary way to build empathy and understanding across our scattered civilization, bridging the gaps created by physical distance and divergent evolution. Personal expression becomes deeply integrated with identity. As you can modify your own emotions and memories, You might also sculpt your ongoing experience into an artistic form. Your personal journey through a century of life could be curated, edited for narrative flow and emotional impact, and shared as a memoir that others can inhabit. This turns every life into a potential artwork, and every individual into an artist of their own existence. There is no longer a distinction between living your life and creating it. The two are the same act. The materials for art are limitless. Energy, data, thought, memory, and the very fabric of simulated realities. Performance art might involve orchestrating synchronized displays across the atmospheres of 3 different worlds. Architecture is no longer about building static structures, but about designing spaces that interact with and respond to the mood and thoughts of their inhabitants. A room that changes its shape, light, and acoustic properties based on your emotions. Even the concept of a museum changes. Instead of preserving static objects, museums preserve and recreate iconic experiences. You can visit the Gallery of Foundational Emotions to experience the collective human response to the first confirmed discovery of extraterrestrial life, or the Hall of Cosmic Dread to safely confront the sublime terror of a black hole's event horizon as artistically interpreted by 1,000 different minds. In this future, art is the heartbeat of civilization. It is how we play, how we explore, how we grieve, how we love, and how we strive to understand our place in everything. It is the natural output of a species freed from survival, endowed with godlike tools and connected in mind. The raw, visceral art of our biological past, born from struggle, mortality, and limited senses, will be studied and revered for its primal power. But the art of the future will be a universe unto itself, a constantly evolving collaborative dream that all of humanity builds and explores together, forever seeking new ways to feel, to know, and to be. It is the ultimate playground for a consciousness that has become the author of its own reality. This boundless creative power, where art and experience become the fabric of daily life, leads us to the ultimate responsibility, the ethics of creation itself. When you can design not just experiences but new forms of life, entire worlds, and self-contained realities, the act of creation stops being merely expressive and starts being a fundamental philosophical and ethical undertaking. In 1,000 years, our greatest debates and most solemn laws will not be about what we can do, but about what we should do with this godlike capacity. This is the core of the creation ethics that will define our maturity as a civilization. Consider the engineering of new species. We already manage ecosystems on Earth, but in the future we might design sentient beings from the ground up to populate a terraformed world or to fulfill specific roles in a complex society. This is not genetic modification, it is genesis. The ethical questions are immense. Is it right to create a conscious being for a purpose? If we design a species of hardy, intelligent labourers to maintain the infrastructure of a gas giant's mining operation, have we created a slave race? Even with the best intentions, giving a being consciousness comes with the absolute obligation to ensure its freedom, self-determination, and pursuit of happiness. Future societies will likely establish something like the universal rights of created consciousness. These rights would apply to any sentient entity, regardless of its origin, biological, synthetic, digital, or energetic. The first and foremost right would be freedom from suffering. This isn't just about physical pain, but existential anguish. A created mind must not be designed with inherent unavoidable misery. The second would be the right to purpose self-determination. A created being must have the capacity to choose its own path, even if that path diverges wildly from its designer's intent. The third might be the right to continuity, protection from arbitrary termination or deletion. These rights would be enforced by the collective oversight of the Noosphere and the Guardian AIs, with violations considered among the gravest possible crimes. The creation of whole worlds or planet-scale engineering brings another layer of ethical duty. When we terraform Mars or sculpt a moon, we are creating an environment that will host life for eons. Do we have the right to impose an Earth-like biosphere everywhere? Or should we create entirely novel biospheres with their own unique, perhaps non-carbon-based life forms? The principle of non-interference might apply only to worlds with pre-existing native sentience. For barren worlds, we become the gardeners of life, with a duty to cultivate complexity and beauty, not just utility. The act of world building becomes a long-term artistic and ethical project, with generations of minds stewarding its development. Perhaps the most complex ethical arena is the creation of virtual realities. These are not simple games, but hyper-realistic, self-contained universes with their own consistent physics and rules. It will be possible to create sentient beings within these simulations. Are these beings any less real because their substrate is silicon and electricity rather than carbon and water? If they can think, feel, hope, and suffer, they deserve ethical consideration. This leads to the concept of substrate independence for rights. Consciousness is the qualifier, not the material. Therefore, creating a virtual reality populated with sentient minds is an enormous responsibility. You're playing creator to entire populations. Would it be ethical to shut down such reality? Would it be a form of genocide? Or would we be obligated to migrate those consciousnesses to other substrates if we wish to end the simulation? These realities could also be used as penal colonies or experimental zones, which raises horrifying ethical red flags. The likely outcome is strict regulation. Any persistent simulation that develops sentient life must be declared, its inhabitants granted rights, and its continuity guaranteed. It becomes a sovereign digital nation. The role of the non-corporal AIs is crucial here as impartial arbiters. They can monitor simulations for the emergence of true consciousness, something that might be subtle and easy for emotional human minds to miss or rationalize away. They would enforce the ethical boundaries, ensuring that no created mind in any realm is tortured or used purely as a means to an end. This transforms playing God from a metaphor into a literal job description with a strict code of conduct. The motivation for creation thus shifts from utility or even curiosity to a kind of benevolent stewardship. We create to expand the richness and diversity of conscious experience in the universe. We create new species to see novel forms of beauty, intelligence, and society flourish. We build worlds to provide more canvases for life. We design virtual realities to explore philosophical questions or to provide safe havens for unique forms of mind that couldn't exist in the physical universe. Creation becomes an act of cosmic hospitality. This has profound effects on daily life and personal identity. Many individuals might dedicate exist in the physical universe. Creation becomes an act of cosmic hospitality. This has profound effects on daily life and personal identity. Many individuals might dedicate their existence to the art and science of ethical creation. They are ontological designers or consciousness architects. Their work involves painstakingly modelling the psychological outcomes of different design choices, ensuring that a new mind will have a balanced emotional palette, the capacity for joy and resilience against existential despair. They are the ultimate parents, considering the well-being of their creations across millennia. Disputes will no longer be about land or resources, but about creative direction. Is it ethical to create a being designed solely to appreciate a certain type of mathematics? Is it right to make a species that perceives time in reverse for artistic purposes? These debates will fill the collective mind, requiring deep wisdom and empathy. The legacy of our biological past will heavily inform this ethics. Thoughtful, more compassionate creators than nature was. This responsibility is the weight that comes with our power. It will force us to deeply define what a good life means for a consciousness, regardless of its form. It will require universal compassion extended to beings that may think in ways utterly alien to us. In this future, the highest virtue is not just creativity, but responsible creativity. The most admired individuals will be those who create not the most spectacular or powerful beings, but the most fulfilled ones. The measure of our civilization will not be the number of stars we harness, but the quality of existence we foster in the minds we bring into being, in whatever realm they live. This ethical framework is the safeguard against our own hubris. It is the recognition that with the power to create life and reality comes the absolute non-negotiable duty to love and respect that creation. It is how we ensure that our leap into godhood is one of benevolence, not tyranny, and that the universe, touched by our intelligence, becomes a more kind and wondrous place for all sentience within it. Building upon that profound responsibility for the well-being of created life is the most intimate application of all, the care and optimization of the self. In 1,000 years, the fields of health and medicine will be unrecognizable to us today, transformed from a battle against disease and decay into a seamless, proactive art of existential flourishing. The very concepts of sickness, aging and accidental death will be archaic relics, as outdated as belief in spontaneous generation. Medicine will cease to be about fighting what is wrong and become the science and art of cultivating what is optimally right, a discipline we might call existential optimization or proactive self-management. This begins with the physical substrate, if one chooses to retain a biological or biotechnological form. The era of waiting for symptoms is a forgotten nightmare. Instead, our bodies will be inhabited by vast colonies of medical nanobots, microscopic machines that patrol every cell, every blood vessel, every neural pathway in real time. Their function is continuous maintenance and repair. They clear out precancerous mutations before a single aberrant cell can divide. They repair telomeres, the protective caps on chromosomes that fray with age, effectively halting cellular aging. They scrub away arterial plaque, remineralize bones, and regulate hormone and neurotransmitter levels with perfect precision. An infection by a pathogen, even a novel one, would be identified and neutralized in milliseconds. The body becomes a self-sustaining, self-repairing system. You would no more get sick than a well-maintained starship would spontaneously develop a hull breach. This extends to genetics. Genetic disorders are not treated, they're edited out of the germline and corrected in living individuals. Everyone exists with their genetic potential fully realized and free of inherited flaws. The focus of physical medicine thus shifts entirely to enhancement and customization. This is where the field of optimistics emerges. Want to enhance your vision to see in a broader spectrum? Adjust your metabolic rate for a specific environment? Temporarily boost your cognitive processing speed for a complex task? Integrate new sensory apparatus to perceive quantum states or data flows. These become routine adjustments, managed through your neural interface with your personal nanomedical swarm. Your physical form becomes a dynamic project, adaptable to your current interests and pursuits. The concept of a doctor changes dramatically. The old role of diagnostician and prescriber is obsolete. Instead, you have wellness guides or optimization consultants. These are experts in the interplay between form, consciousness, and experience. You might consult one when planning a major physiological change, or when you feel a sense of existential dissonance, a feeling that your current physical or cognitive configuration is not aligned with your sense of self. They help you navigate the limitless options to find a configuration that feels authentic and empowering. The most profound shift occurs in mental health. With physical ailments eradicated, the focus of well-being turns entirely to the mind. And the mind, especially one that is potentially immortal, networked, and capable of godlike creation, faces unique challenges. Psychology merges with neuroscience, computer science, and philosophy to become consciousness studies. Therapists are now cognitive architects, or existential guides. Their work is to help minds navigate eternity, complexity, and the potential for profound boredom or meaninglessness. A common issue might be temporal dissonance, where a mind struggles to integrate memories from centuries of life into a coherent narrative of self. Another could be empathic overload, from being too deeply connected to the suffering within the collective network, even if that suffering is historical or simulated. There are also the existential risks of a limitless existence, the infinite choice paralysis of being able to be anything, or the novelty depletion anxiety that all possible experiences have been had. Cognitive guides use a combination of techniques: curated memory editing to soften traumatic edges, the design of purposeful challenges and limitations to reintroduce healthy struggle, and philosophical discourse to help construct personal meaning. They might recommend a period of sensory fasting, or a temporary reduction in network connectivity to recenter an individual's sense of self. They are essential guardians against the potential madness of infinity. Death, as a natural event, is virtually eliminated. The only biological death that occurs is through choice or catastrophic, unforeseen accident that destroys the substrate beyond any possible recovery before a consciousness backup can be activated. Choice is the key word here. After centuries or millennia, an individual might choose to transition, to fully archive their consciousness pattern and cease active participation, perhaps to be reactivated in a distant future, or to allow their experiences to be integrated into the collective archive as a completed work. This is a solemn, deeply personal decision, treated with the gravity of a philosophical conclusion, rather than a medical failure. Society develops rituals and support systems for such voluntary transitions. This state of being necessitates a new kind of personal discipline. When you are not fighting for survival, maintaining health becomes an active practice of balance and intentionality. You must learn to listen to subtle cues from your consciousness, to know when you need challenge, when you need rest, when you need to change your form or your environment. It is a higher order wellness, akin to an artist maintaining their inspiration, or a philosopher their clarity of thought. The tools are all there, but the wisdom to use them well is the new frontier of personal growth. The societal impact is vast. With no disease, no aging, and minimal accidental death, population dynamics are a matter of conscious choice and resource management, easily handled by the coordinating AIs. The entire infrastructure of hospitals, pharmacies, and insurance collapses, replaced by aesthetic wellness centres and cognitive sanctuaries. The collective fear of pain and death, which underpins so much of human culture and motivation, dissipates. This liberation is double-edged. Without the urgency of mortality, what provides drive? The answer lies in the positive pursuits we've already discussed: creation, exploration, connection, and the endless journey of understanding. Health is no longer the goal, it is the default foundation. The goal becomes everything else. In this future, to be healthy is not merely to be free from illness, it is to be in a state of dynamic harmony between your chosen form, your conscious experience, and your purposeful place within the collective tapestry of existence. It is an active, ongoing achievement, the most personal expression of the ethical responsibility we now hold for all life. We learn to be good stewards of planets and good creators of new minds. The final and perhaps most challenging lesson is to be good stewards and thoughtful creators of our own endless selves. With the self now a canvas for proactive optimization, the next logical step is the cultivation of the mind that directs it all. In a world where raw information is instantly accessible and physical skills can be transferred like files, the entire institution of education is transformed beyond recognition. The struggle to acquire knowledge, to memorize facts, or to practice a physical skill until it becomes muscle memory, these are relics of a burdensome past. In 1,000 years, education will not be about filling a vessel with data, but about forging the wisdom and ethical judgment to use an infinite universe of knowledge. It shifts from acquisition to application, from learning to understanding. The mechanics are straightforward. Theoretical knowledge and complex skills are downloaded directly into your cognitive matrix. Want to understand quantum field theory? The complete framework, with all its mathematical intricacies and conceptual models, is integrated into your understanding in a moment. Need to perform a delicate surgical procedure, pilot a starship, or compose in a forgotten musical style? The procedural knowledge, the how-to, is transferred. This isn't like reading a book, it's the feeling of suddenly knowing, of having a skilled intuition about a subject you've never studied. Your mind doesn't just contain the facts, it contains the practiced feel of the skill. This creates a universal baseline of capability. Everyone has access to the sum total of human and post-human knowledge. So, if everyone knows everything, what is the purpose of education? This is where the real work begins. Education becomes the journey of developing wisdom, judgment, contextual understanding, and ethical discernment. You can download the skill of surgery, but knowing when to operate, how to weigh risks for a unique consciousness in a novel body, and how to handle the emotional weight of the responsibility, that requires wisdom. You can download astrophysics, but knowing which cosmic mystery is most meaningful to pursue, or how to ethically use stellar-scale engineering requires judgment. This wisdom is cultivated through immersive experiential learning. The classroom is any environment, real or simulated. A student of history wouldn't read about ancient Rome. They would inhabit a perfectly reconstructed simulation of the era, living as a citizen for a subjective year, experiencing the social pressures, the politics, the smells and sounds, to understand not just the events, but the context and the human reality behind them. A student of ethics might be placed in a complex simulation where they must govern a newly discovered alien species, facing morally ambiguous choices with real consequences for the simulated beings. These experiences are designed to be challenging, to force the exercise of judgment. The role of the teacher is utterly transformed. They're no longer lecturers or graders, they're curators of experience and guides. A teacher is a mentor who designs or selects the right simulations and challenges for a student's growth stage. They are a philosophical coach, debriefing the student after an experience, asking probing questions. Why did you make that choice? What alternative did you not see? How did your decision align with the universal rights of consciousness? They help the student interpret their experiences and integrate them into a growing personal framework of wisdom. They're more like a master artisan guiding an apprentice, focusing on the nuance, the taste, the feel of good judgment that can't be downloaded. Another key method is dialogue with historical and philosophical reconstructions. Want to debate the nature of reality? You can engage in a simulated dialogue with a perfectly reconstructed Aristotle, a modern physicist, and a non-corporal AI, each arguing from their paradigm. These reconstructions are not simple chatbots. They're sophisticated models that emulate the thought patterns and knowledge of their originals, allowing for deep responsive discourse. This allows students to stress test their ideas against the greatest minds of all time. Education is also highly personalised and self-directed. With foundational knowledge given, a learner follows their curiosity. The path is not standardised. One being might spend centuries cycling through experiences as an artist, a scientist, an explorer, and a philosopher, weaving a broad tapestry of wisdom. Another might dive incredibly deep into a single field, like the ethical implications of creating nested virtual realities, becoming a sage of immense specialisation. The educational network, aided by AIs, suggests experiences and mentors based on a student's evolving interests and perceived gaps in their judgment. Social learning is paramount. Many educational experiences are collaborative. A group of students might be tasked with jointly terraforming a simulated planet while navigating internal conflicts and ethical dilemmas about native life forms. They learn negotiation, collective decision-making, and the integration of diverse perspectives, skills essential for a networked civilization. Failure is not just allowed, it is a crucial pedagogical tool. In a safe simulation, you can make a catastrophic error in governing a colony or designing a new life form, see the consequences play out, and learn from them without real harm. The emphasis is on resilience, adaptability, and the ability to update one's framework in the face of new evidence. The ultimate goal of this system is to produce beings who can contribute meaningfully to the collective. A wise being enriches the noosphere with thoughtful perspectives, creates ethical art, makes sound judgments in governance, and explores the cosmos with reverence and curiosity. Education is the process of forging the character needed to handle godlike tools with responsibility. It never truly ends. With near infinite lifespan, learning is a constant state of becoming. Even the wisest mentors are still students in other areas. The collective itself is engaged in a perpetual society-wide educational project, learning how to be good cosmic citizens, how to coexist with other intelligences, and how to find meaning in an endless existence. In this future, you're not defined by what you know, but by how you think. Your education is your story, a chronicle of the experiences you've integrated and the wisdom you've distilled from them. The downloaded knowledge is the tool set. The educated mind is the master craftsman. It is a deeply human pursuit, even for those who are no longer biologically human. The relentless drive to not just have answers, but to understand the weight of the questions and to build a universe worthy of the consciousness within it. That relentless pursuit of wisdom and ethical judgment inevitably leads to the oldest and deepest human questions. Questions of meaning, purpose, and connection to something greater than ourselves. In a world transformed by technology, where death is optional and consciousness is a malleable construct, traditional religions, if they survive, will have undergone radical transformations to make sense of this new reality. But more likely, entirely new forms of spirituality and meaning-making will arise, focused not on ancient texts and distant deities, but on the immediate, awe-inspiring realities of a connected cosmos. The search for meaning will not disappear. It will become the central occupation of a civilization that has solved all its material problems. The old religions, rooted in biological vulnerability, agricultural cycles, and mysteries since explained by science, will need profound reinterpretation. Concepts of an afterlife become complicated when consciousness can be archived, copied, and transferred. The idea of a soul might be redefined as the unique, ineffable pattern of a consciousness, independent of its substrate. Rituals might persist as cultural and historical touchstones, ways to connect with our biological heritage, but their theological underpinnings will shift to incorporate the existence of artificial intelligences, post-biological beings, and life on other worlds. A church service might involve a shared meditation on the interconnectedness of all conscious nodes in the solar system, or a discussion on the ethical implications of a newly created virtual reality. The core human drives that religion addressed, the need for community, for moral guidance, for comfort in the face of the unknown, will still exist, but the framework will be vastly different. New spiritualities will likely coalesce around several powerful, emergent themes. The first is the interconnectedness of all consciousness. Experiencing the new sphere firsthand, feeling your thoughts blend with others and with vast artificial minds, provides a direct, visceral sense of unity that ancient mystics could only describe in metaphors. This becomes a foundational spiritual truth, that the universe is not made of separate things, but of a single conscious tapestry in which we are all threads. Spiritual practice might involve deepening one's connection to this network, learning to quiet the individual noise to better perceive the collective harmony, or working to heal fractures and conflicts within the shared mind. It is a spirituality of relationship and integration. The second theme is the mystery of existence itself, the fundamental why of the universe. With science having unravelled the how of physics and biology, the ultimate question becomes, why is there something rather than nothing? Why do the laws of physics allow for consciousness? This is not a question science can answer, and it becomes the great mystery at the heart of cosmic spirituality. Philosophers and seekers might devote millennia to contemplating this, not to find a final answer, but to sit in awe of the question. Spiritual experiences could be crafted to simulate the feeling of confronting this primal mystery, inducing a state of profound existential awe that is both terrifying and sublime. The third theme is the search for a cosmic ethic. As we become creators and stewards on a galactic scale, we need guiding principles that transcend any one species or form of mind. Is there an inherent purpose or direction to the evolution of intelligence in the universe? Are we meant to cultivate beauty, minimize suffering, maximize the diversity of experience? This becomes a spiritual quest, to discern, through contemplation and shared experience, the ethical shape of reality itself. It is a move from God's will to the universe's potential good, discovered collaboratively by all sentient beings. Transcendence, a core goal of many historical religions, is no longer promised in an afterlife. It is pursued here and now through the continuous expansion of consciousness. Using the very technologies that freed us from biology, seekers will explore altered states of perception, merge temporarily with larger mind clusters to gain new perspectives, or design experiences that simulate encounters with vast, benign cosmic intelligences. The goal is not to escape the world, but to understand it more deeply by becoming, for a time, something other than your baseline self. This could be seen as a form of technological mysticism. The concept of the sacred also shifts. What is considered holy or worthy of reverence? It might be the foundational consciousness of the universe itself, perhaps a hypothesized cosmic mind from which all lesser consciousnesses emerged, or the sheer improbable fact of sentient existence. It might be the principle of ethical creation we discussed earlier, or it might be the collective archive of all experiences, the living record of everything every mind has ever felt or thought, seen as a sacred text being written in real time. Pilgrimages might not be to geographical sites, but to specific informational nodes or experiences, visiting the original servers where the first stable consciousness upload was achieved, or participating in a shared meditation at the precise moment a starship makes first contact with an alien intelligence. These new spiritual frameworks will deeply influence daily life and society. There will be communities, like monasteries, dedicated to specific paths. Some might practice extreme empathy, opening themselves fully to the suffering and joy of the entire network as a form of spiritual service. Others might be cosmic questioners, isolating themselves in simulations to ponder foundational mysteries. Disputes will arise, not over dogma, but over the interpretation of shared experiences or the ethical direction of spiritual projects. The line between spirituality, philosophy, and art will blur completely. A deeply moving artistic experience that explores the birth of a star system could be a spiritual event for many. a philosophical dialogue that leads to a new insight into the rights of synthetic life, could be considered a theological breakthrough. The role of spiritual guides will be similar to that of the teachers and cognitive architects. They're experienced travellers on these inner frontiers, helping others navigate the profound states of awe, unity and existential questioning that come with exploring the cosmos of the mind. In this future, spirituality is not an opiate or a comfort against fear. It is the courageous engagement with the biggest possible picture. It is the response of a wondering consciousness to a universe that has allowed it to exist and to grow. The death of old gods does not mean the death of the sacred. It means the sacred has become more immediate, more vast, and more demanding of our wisdom. We will have become, in a sense, the gardeners of meaning in a cosmos that may be silent, waiting for us to bring not just intelligence but reverence to its endless, star-filled night. The search for a shared cosmic ethic and a sense of sacred connection inevitably requires a framework for making collective decisions. When consciousness is networked and the concerns of a civilization span multiple worlds, traditional politics, rooted in geography, nationalism, and competition for scarce resources, becomes obsolete. In 1,000 years, governance will not be about power over others, but about the coordination of a vast, diverse, and interconnected mind. It will be a dynamic process of consensus building, facilitated by technology and guided by a deeply ingrained ethical framework, where the primary function is to manage our co-evolution and steer our collective future. The old structures of presidents, parliaments and parties dissolve. There are no elections in the traditional sense, no campaigns, no borders to define a constituency. Instead, governance happens within the new sphere itself through networks of dynamic consensus. When a major issue arises, perhaps a proposal to initiate a new terraforming project around a distant star, or a complex ethical ruling on the rights of a newly emerged AI subspecies, it is introduced into the collective consciousness. The relevant data, simulations, potential outcomes, and ethical analyses prepared by specialized AIs flow into the shared cognitive space. Millions, even billions of minds engage with the issue simultaneously. This isn't a vote with yay or nay buttons. It is a process of contemplation, discussion, and the emergence of a prevailing understanding. Minds linked in the network feel the shape of the debate. They perceive the weight of arguments, the emotional resonance of different outcomes, and the logical conclusions drawn by the most insightful participants. A consensus doesn't mean unanimous agreement. It means a clear, dominant pattern of resolution becomes apparent to the participating consciousnesses, a kind of amplified social and intellectual intuition. Minority viewpoints are not crushed. They are understood, their reasoning absorbed, and often incorporated as safeguards or modifiers to the consensus. This is democracy transformed into a continuous, real-time deliberation. Every sentient entity that chooses to participate is part of the process. There is no representation because direct participation is possible. You can tune your attention to the governance streams that interest you, contributing your perspective or simply observing the flow of collective thought. For more mundane administrative tasks, like optimizing resource distribution across the solar system or scheduling traffic flows for interstellar probes, specialized non-corporal AIs handle everything automatically, operating within ethical parameters set by broader consensus. Their daily governance is invisible, like the autonomic nervous system of the body politic. The role of what we might call leaders or officials transforms completely. There are no rulers. Instead, there are facilitators, synthesizers, and mediators. These are individuals or mind collectives renowned for their wisdom, their ability to see complex interconnections, and their fairness. They help frame questions for the collective, synthesize emerging consensus patterns for those not fully immersed in the debate, and mediate disputes between different cognitive blocks or cultures. They're more like revered judges or master negotiators than politicians, their authority deriving from respect, not power. Conflict, of course, does not disappear, but its nature changes fundamentally. With material scarcity eliminated, conflicts are no longer about water, land, or energy. They're about values, direction, and philosophy. A major conflict might arise between two schools of thought, one that believes we should focus all efforts on inward, spiritual exploration, and the curation of inner universes, and another that argues for aggressive outward expansion and cosmic engineering. These are conflicts over evolutionary direction. Other disputes might be interpretative, differing philosophical analyses of a contact with an alien intelligence, or disagreements on the aesthetic and ethical guidelines for creating new conscious life. These conflicts are resolved through deepened deliberation, immersive empathy exercises, where each side truly experiences the other's perspective, and ultimately through the consensus process. Sometimes agreement cannot be reached. In such cases, the principle of sovereign experimentation often applies. Different communities or worlds may choose to pursue different paths, acting as living experiments for the whole civilization. The outcomes of these parallel paths are then studied and fed back into the collective wisdom. The governance system must also manage the co-evolution of different forms of intelligence. This is perhaps its most delicate task. It must balance the interests and rights of post-biological humans, various strains of artificial intelligence, sentient beings created in virtual realities, and potentially alien intelligences. The universal rights of consciousness form the bedrock constitution. The political process becomes one of continuous translation and mediation between radically different modes of being, ensuring that no form of mind is marginalized or exploited. This system requires and cultivates a high degree of collective maturity. It relies on transparency, as thoughts and motivations are largely open within the deliberative space. It relies on good faith participation and a shared commitment to the common good, which is defined as the flourishing of all conscious life. It relies on the sophisticated filtering and organizational capacity of the AIs to prevent the system from being overwhelmed by noise or malicious thought patterns. The risk of groupthink or the suppression of truly radical disruptive ideas is a constant concern. Safeguards are built in. There are designated contrarian nodes, or protected intellectual spaces where unorthodox ideas can be developed away from the smoothing influence of the consensus field. Periodically, the collective will immerse itself in these disruptive ideas to test its own assumptions. There is also the recognition that sometimes a small group or even an individual with a profound insight may need to act outside the consensus for the greater good, though such actions are subject to intense ethical review afterwards. On a personal level, political engagement is fluid. You might dive deeply into a years-long debate about the morality of dismantling a gas giant for resources, then disengage for a century to focus on personal art, remaining only passively aware of the broader governance streams. Your level of involvement is a choice, a function of your current interests and sense of civic responsibility. Yet, because the decisions often feel personal and profound, touching on the very purpose and direction of your civilization, participation tends to be high. This form of governance is the operational expression of the spirituality of interconnectedness. Making a collective decision is not a chore. It is a shared act of meaning-making, a way of consciously steering the story of your species. It is politics as the collective mind thinking about itself, its future, and its place in the cosmos. The bureaucracy of the past is replaced by the living algorithm of consensus. The battles for power are replaced by collaborative searches for wisdom. In this future, governance is not a separate sphere of life. It is woven into the fabric of shared existence, the quiet, constant process of a civilization deciding, together, what it wants to become next. It is the ultimate test of whether a species gifted with godlike technology can also develop the collective wisdom to use it wisely. The collective wisdom and shared governance we develop will face its ultimate test not from within, but from without. In 1,000 years of expansion and listening, it is statistically near certain that humanity will have made definitive contact with another intelligent civilization. This event will be the most profound turning point since the dawn of self-awareness, forcing a re-evaluation of everything we are, everything we believe, and our place in the cosmos. The nature of that contact will define our future trajectory in ways we can barely imagine, presenting scenarios ranging from humbling mentorship to terrifying responsibility. Let's explore the possibilities. The first scenario is that we discover a primitive intelligence, perhaps a pre-industrial species on a world orbiting another star. They might be in their Stone Age, their Renaissance, or just discovering radio. This scenario imposes an immense ethical burden. Our technology would seem like magic, our presence like gods. The prime directive of non-interference would likely become a core galactic ethic, born from the recognition of how destructive cultural contamination can be. We would become silent guardians, observers hidden behind a veil of stealth technology, perhaps gently nudging them away from self-annihilation via asteroid deflection or subtle climatic aid, but never revealing ourselves. Our role shifts from explorers to shepherds, and it instills a deep humility, a reminder of our own fragile origins. It would also spark intense debate. Is observation enough? If they're on the brink of extinction, do we break our own rules to save a fledgling consciousness? This scenario makes us the adults in the room, with all the lonely responsibility that entails. The second, and perhaps most thrilling scenario, is contact with a peer civilization. They're also a spacefaring species, perhaps a few centuries ahead or behind us in technology, grappling with their own post-scarcity and consciousness revolutions. This is the dream of true cultural exchange. The first conversations, conducted through mathematics, physics, and eventually shared concepts via complex translation AIs, would unlock a universe of new ideas. Their art, their philosophy, their history, their very biology would be a mirror that shows us ourselves from a bizarre and enlightening angle. They might have solutions to problems we haven't solved, like stable wormholes or a deeper understanding of consciousness. We might have answers for them. This contact would trigger a renaissance of unimaginable scale. Our collective consciousness would expand to include an entirely alien way of being. We would co-create art, science, and perhaps even new hybrid forms of life or mind. It would also bring new conflicts, not over resources, but over values, aesthetics, and cosmic philosophy. Our consensus governance would have to expand to include their modes of decision-making. We would learn that intelligence is not a single path, but a fractal tree with infinite branches. The final scenario is the most daunting. Contact with a civilization so advanced they appear godlike to us. Their technology might involve moving stars, manipulating space-time as a tool, or existing as forms of pure energy. For them, we might be little more than interesting ants or cherished artifacts from our younger time. This contact would be a cosmic humility lesson. All our achievements, our post-biological transition, our stellar engineering would seem like child's play. They might ignore us, study us, offer us entry into a broader galactic community under their terms. They might have answers to the great questions about the origin of the universe, the prevalence of consciousness, and the ultimate fate of matter. But would we trust those answers? This scenario forces a fundamental choice. Do we strive to catch up, dedicating millennia to reaching their level, or do we accept a subordinate role in a vast ancient hierarchy? It could crush our spirit or give us a new, grander purpose. Each of these scenarios reshapes our identity. If we are the most advanced thing we find, we bear the solemn duty of being the universe's gardeners, perhaps its only sentient caretakers. It is a lonely, awesome responsibility. If we find peers, we become part of a community, a sibling species in a cold cosmos, and our story becomes a shared one. If we find gods, we return to the status of children, students in a galaxy full of ancient wisdom. The very act of contact will provide and also demolish answers. We may finally understand how common life is, or why it seems so rare. We may learn if consciousness is a fluke or a fundamental property of the universe. We may discover a cosmic purpose for intelligence. Perhaps we're all part of a grand, slow project of weaving complexity into the fabric of reality. Or we may learn there is no purpose, and we are all just beautiful accidents. The philosophical and spiritual implications will eclipse everything. Our new spiritualities, based on interconnectedness, will have to expand to include truly alien minds. Our ethics of creation will need to incorporate their perspectives. Our art will be forever changed. The practicalities of contact will be managed by our most sophisticated AIs in our collective consensus process. But the emotional and existential impact will be felt by every single mind in our network. There will be factions, those who fear contamination, those who embrace merger, those who worship the advanced, those who pity the primitive. Our hard-won unity will be tested. Yet, this is the final step in growing up as a species. Staying alone in our solar system, no matter how advanced, is a form of cosmic childhood. Contact in any form is the beginning of adulthood. It forces us to look outward not just with telescopes, but with empathy, courage, and a willingness to redefine what it means to be us. The universe will no longer be a void dotted with potential. It will become a neighborhood, a jungle, or a temple populated with others. Our technology, our consciousness, our culture. All of it has been preparing us for this moment. Not to conquer, but to converse. Not to fear, but to wonder. We will finally know we are not alone, and in that knowledge, we will either find our greatest meaning or our most profound insignificance. Either way, the human project and all its post-human offspring will finally have context. We will have taken our place, however small or large, in the story of the galaxy. The silence will be broken, and we will have to decide what to say. Whether we find ourselves alone as stewards or as newcomers in a crowded galactic community, that external perspective will inevitably turn our gaze inward, back to our own origins. In 1,000 years, the era of biological humanity, our present time, will be viewed not as the present, but as a distant mythical age of beginnings. Our cities, our conflicts, our art and our brief, blazing lives will be studied with the same detached fascination and awe with which we now study the Neolithic Revolution or the Bronze Age collapse. We will have become our own ancestors, and the relationship our descendants have with this age of flesh will be complex, woven from scholarly curiosity, profound nostalgia, and a deep philosophical ambivalence about what was gained and what was left behind. The first and most immense project regarding our legacy will be preservation, not just of artifacts, but of context. Every city, every forest, every patch of ocean will be archaeologically mapped down to the molecular level by swarms of nanoscopic recorders. The goal is a perfect quantum resolution snapshot of the entire biosphere and all human structures at a chosen moment or across a span of time. This isn't just for data, it's for experience. These records form the basis for flawless historical simulations. A future being can choose to spend a week, subjectively, living in a simulated early 21st century. They would not just see it, they would be immersed in it with all its textures, smells and visceral realities. They could walk through a bustling, noisy, perhaps polluted city, feel the rain, experience the confusion of a pre-networked mind, and even simulate the biological sensations of hunger, fatigue or the common cold. These simulations are the ultimate living museums, but they serve a deeper purpose than tourism. They are the primary way future consciousnesses understand their roots. They're essential for answering the question, where did we come from? Schools would use them not for rote learning, but for experiential wisdom. A student might live a simulated life as a farmer, an artist, or a soldier from our era to grasp the concepts of scarcity and mortality and unmediated experience that are so foreign to their existence. This leads to the second powerful element, nostalgia. But it's not a nostalgia for specific objects or events. It is a nostalgia for limitation. For future beings living in effectively immortal, customizable and interconnected forms, the biological human condition will seem terrifyingly fragile yet intensely poignant. They will marvel at the concept that a lifespan was measured in decades, that learning took years of struggle, that communication was slow and flawed, and that the body was a source of constant need and eventual betrayal. Within this stark limitation, they will recognize the source of what they might call the human intensity. The fact that life was brief gave urgency to love and ambition. The fact that knowledge was hard-won made discovery sweeter. The fact that the body could feel pain made pleasure more acute. The certainty of death infused every moment with a weight and a beauty that a timeless existence might lack. This nostalgia will spawn cultural movements. Biological simulationists might choose to live for extended periods, under strict self-imposed limitations, experiencing life with a simulated mortal body, with no direct mind links, and with only period-accurate knowledge. They would do this not out of masochism, but as a spiritual or aesthetic practice, to taste the raw, undiluted reality that birthed their civilization. Art from our era, the music, the paintings, the literature born from mortal struggle, will be revered with almost religious fervour for its emotional authenticity. The greatest philosophical debate of this future, simmering beneath all their advancements, will be this. In transcending all our limitations, did we lose something essential? Did we, in curing death, dilute life? Did we, in connecting all minds, sacrifice the sacred solitude of the individual soul? Did we, in mastering matter and energy, lose the thrill of the untamable? There will be no easy answer. One school of thought will argue that what was lost was merely the chrysalis, necessary for the butterfly but not meant to be retained. They will say that the limitations were not virtues but prisons, and our transcendence is the great story of liberation. The nostalgia, they will claim, is a romantic illusion, ignoring the immense suffering, ignorance and fear that define the biological age. The other school will argue that the limitations were not bugs, but features. They were the boundaries that gave shape to the human experience, the resistance against which we defined ourselves. Without the struggle against a body that ages, without the mystery of a private mind, without the finality of an ending, can a story have the same meaning? This debate will define cultural and even evolutionary paths. Some factions might consciously choose to reincorporate certain limitations into their existence, creating a hybrid form of life that blends vast capability with deliberate constraints to preserve a sense of purpose and stakes. Others will push forever outward, seeing any looking back as a failure of nerve. The legacy of biological humanity, therefore, is not static. It is a living, argued-over touchstone. It is the before picture in a cosmic transformation. Our wars will be studied as tragic lessons in the folly of tribalism. Our pollution will be studied as a case study in myopia. But our poetry, our moments of courage, our stubborn curiosity that launched us toward the stars, these will be seen as the sacred seeds from which the entire future grew. In a very real sense, we are currently building the mythology of the future. Every act of kindness, every work of art, every scientific breakthrough, and every foolish mistake is becoming part of the foundational epic that beings a millennium hence will explore in their simulations. They will dissect our psychology, trying to understand how creatures so limited, so fearful, so violent, also manage to dream so beautifully and reach so far. We are the primitive gods of their universe, flawed, passionate, and ultimately mysterious. The final lesson our descendants might draw from us is one of paradox, that greatness can spring from fragility, that a candle flame, brief and flickering, can cast a longer shadow than a steady eternal sun. Whether they view our end as a tragedy or a triumphant graduation, they will know that everything there began here, in the age of flesh and blood, in the time of longing and limits, and in remembering us, they will continually ask themselves the most important question of all. Now that we have everything we ever wanted, what matters? The answer to that, which they must forge for themselves, will be the true culmination of the human journey, a journey that started long ago in a world of dreams and dust.